All right, we'll start the meeting at 9:33. I will introduce everybody first. I'm Karen Hyde, the presiding member. In the room with me, I have other panel members, Eugene Coltaz, deputy presiding member, and John Symes, specialist member. For Part B from the Shire of Harvey, we also have our elected members, Craig Carboni and Michelle Campbell. And for Part C, our elected members from the Shire of Augusta-Margaret River, David Binks online, and in the room with me, Greg Boland. We've also got members of the Development Assessment Panel Secretariat in the room. I'd like to acknowledge that we're hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia, and pay respect to elders past and present, and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters, and community. The meeting will be run in accordance with the RDAP Standing Orders 2024 under the Planning and Development Assessment Panels Regulations 2011. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the RDAP website in accordance with the regulations, and members are reminded to announce their name and title prior to speaking. Panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. Item 2 on our agenda, we have no apologies. Item 3, we do not have members on leave of absence at this point. And item 4, minutes, previous meeting minutes are available on the RDAP website. Part B of our agenda, Shire of Harvey. I wonder if I could ask all panel members to raise their hand to demonstrate that they have given due consideration of all of the documentation contained within Part B of the agenda and other relevant information. Yes, I can see a show of hands on the screen. Thank you. I'll come back to you for the next part. Thank you. I'd like to invite members to declare any additional declarations of interest. Do I have any from the panel for this item? No. For the elected members from the Shire of Harvey, yes, thank you, Councillor. Please go ahead.
Councillor Michelle Campbell, just wanted to declare an impartiality interest in that council received a presentation on the battery energy storage shed on the 24th of September. It was a presentation only, and no decisions or further discussions were made after this presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. And Councillor Carboni, did that apply to you as well? Yes, thank you.
Yes, it does, yeah.
Many thanks. Thank you for that declaration. Having considered that in the context of the RDAP Code of Context, and noting that you are conducting yourselves in accordance with your positions as elected member, we acknowledge that you're not bound by any previous decisions or resolution of council or any participation in that exercise. And so please continue on this meeting to debate, discuss, ask questions, etc. Thank you for that. Okay, so with that, we will move ahead to item 3.1, which is for Lot 5, Wellesley Road North, Wellesley, which is a proposed renewable energy facility. And we have presentations. Presentations are limited to 3 minutes. We have 2 presentations. Both presenters, I believe, are online for this. Mr. Matthew Stewart and Mr. Nick Hidding. So I think Mr. Stewart from Sunrise Energy was going first. If panel members are happy, shall we hear from both presenters and then we can ask them questions? Are we comfortable with that? Yeah, okay. So over to you, Mr. Stewart and Mr. Hidding. You've got 3 minutes each. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Hi everyone, I'm Matt Stewart. I'm the project manager at Sunrise Energy Group. I believe you received our submission to the presentation in May.
Mr. Stewart, sorry, could I just interrupt you? You might need to speak closer to your microphone. It's a little bit difficult to hear you. You seem to be breaking up.
Okay, sorry about that. I'll try again. Yes, I'm Matt Stewart. I'm the project manager at Sunrise Energy Group. I believe you received our submission for the presentation, and I may have had a chance to go over this. So I won't repeat it in detail, but we'll speak mostly about the positives of the site for the project. Sunrise Energy Group is a WA renewable energy developer. It has successfully delivered projects like a 3 megawatt solar farm and a groundbreaking renewable microgrid build business park, which included a grid connected battery. So building on our battery experience and expertise in grid connected assets, Sunrise decided to try and address the demand for energy storage in WA. And after securing an ideal site near Western Power's Kemerton terminal, Sunrise committed to developing a battery project. So the location is consistent with other large battery projects that connect to the Western Power network and are already in operational under construction in WA, such as those at Brennan, Polly and Major. And these are also purposely located as close as possible to a Western Power terminal substation to enable the high voltage connections. And this is because one, locations that are not in proximity to a terminal or substation require either A, expensive and time consuming to develop high voltage power lines, which often have to cross multiple land holdings and require significant vegetation clearing, or B, cuttings to existing power lines, which are unlikely to be approved by Western Power. So 2 is also more cost effective and therefore better for stakeholders as it helps to keep electricity prices down. The battery soaks up excess solar generation during the day, storing this energy to be discharged into the grid during peak times, providing more power when it is needed, effectively reducing energy costs, displacing open cycle gas turbine and diesel generation. And 3, it improves the project development and construction schedule, allowing the battery to provide its service sooner, which is needed in the WA grid. Last summer, Western Power had to ask large electricity consumers to reduce their load as the electricity grid was on the verge of exceeding its total capacity. Other positive attributes to the site include the land is zoned as industrial, so the land use is allowed within its current zoning. The area is already host to critical electrical infrastructure with a 300 megawatt Kemerton power plant 3 kilometres from the site, and there's both 330 kV and 132 kV networks near to the property. Also, the site is only 1 kilometre from the Bustle Highway with good road access, and the area where the infrastructure will be located has already had vegetation cleared as a result of earlier sand mining on the site, meaning only minimal vegetation clearing is required. This is to comply with our bushfire management plan. And lastly, there are no cultural heritage requirements associated with the site. So that's it for me. Thanks for the opportunity to present and for your consideration of this project.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Very good. Mr. Hidding, over to you now. And I think you wanted to draw our attention to a couple of the conditions which you were seemingly wanting to make some changes to. Thank you.
Thank you, presiding member, and good morning, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity. Nick Hidding, Hidding Urban Planning, representing Sunrise Energy in this proposed battery energy storage system, renewable energy facility in Wellesley. Matthew's outlined all the benefits of this project. We have a recommendation for approval in front of you this morning, set out by the Shire of Harvey, which we support, and we thank the Shire for its recommendation. As set out in my submission, we are seeking some minor changes to the conditions, particularly condition 8 and condition 11. Our bushfire consultant has reviewed those and consulted directly with the Shire on these changes. So if there's any questions with respect to those, they're both related to bushfire reporting. If there's any questions about the requested changes, Mike Scott from Bushfire Prone Planning is connected this morning and can answer any of those queries. But essentially, condition 8 would seek deletion of that. We believe it's not necessary for that to be imposed anymore. And condition 11 to be reworded just to reflect the correct reporting requirement. Other than that, we're very happy with the recommendation for approval. We'd ask that the panel approve the development this morning with those changes. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hidding. That's lovely. So questions of the panel, I might invite the elected members online if they have any questions for either presenter, please.
No, I don't have any.
No questions.
No questions from you. Anybody from this side of the room wish to have any questions? Okay, we've also got Ben Vogel there. Hi, Benjamin, from the Shire. Did the elected members have any questions of the Shire officer?
No.
No.
Okay, any of the panel members questions of the Shire officer?
Just whether the Shire officers have been contacted and agree with the presentation or condition, deletion and amendment.
Mr. Vogel, did you hear that?
Yes, so I was contacted by the bushfire consultant and we are happy with the proposed changes to the conditions.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? All good. Okay, we will therefore move.
Oh, sorry, just
yes,
one.
go ahead, Mr. Coltas.
The approval, is it required under the Greater Bunbury Region scheme as well? If it is, we would need to add that into the preamble. I think I didn't see it on the RA. Anyway, that's fine. Okay, we'll address that shortly.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, just making some notes here, sorry. With that, then we will refer to our item at 3.1. And we have a responsible authority recommendation to accept this as a renewable energy facility under planning scheme number 2 and to approve the application. So in the first instance, I'll seek a mover and a seconder for that, and then we can take the amending motions should there be those. Thank you, Councillor Carboni moves. A seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Carboni?
Yeah, I think this is a great fit for the land use. Obviously, the Kemerton Industrial Park has been zoned and designated for 30 years with not much happening there, and this is a great facility to go into a land area that has previously been used as an extractive industry, and it's a great fit for this property, which I know very well. So yeah, that's about all I've got to add. I think it's just a great use, and it'll complement the Southwest Interconnected Grid, and yeah, that'll do.
Thank you very much. Councillor Campbell, did you wish to speak to the motion?
Nothing further to add other than supporting Councillor Carboni's comments in regards to the repurposing of this site. Yeah, very good. So fully supportive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Was there any objection or any amending motions?
Yes, I'm supporting it, of course, but I would also like to move an amending motion to include the resolution that this is also approved under the Greater Bunbury Region scheme.
Yeah.
And secondly, also delete condition 8.
Yeah.
And amend condition 11 as worded in the presentation by Mr. Hidding.
Okay, that's moved by Mr. Coltas. Is there a seconder, please? Thank you. Seconded by Mr. Symes. So that's 3 parts to that amending motion. Mr. Coltas, did you wish to speak to it?
I think it's fairly straightforward.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Syme. Did you want to follow on that amending motion?
No, the amending motions are straightforward.
Okay, shall we vote on that amending motion then? There's 3 parts to it, if we're all clear, to include the Greater Bunbury Region scheme reference, to delete condition 8, and to alter the wording of condition 11 as per the applicant's request. So just let's vote on that as an amending motion. Those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. Any other amending motions? Did either Mr. Coltas or Mr. Syme wish to speak on this as a motion?
No, I'm just supporting it, that's all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Syme.
No, just to note that this is a very, very good location for this sort of facility. It's an important one. The issues on fire are ones of mitigation. They're not something that should drive the location. I think this is a very good proposal.
Thank you. I too am supportive of the motion as put and those amendments. I think that's the primary function of a specialised industrial area, I think the technical matters have been dealt with prior to the application being received or are subject of suitable conditions. So I thank the officers for a very clear report on this matter. So did you wish to close the debate, Councillor Carboni?
Ed, thanks.
Okay, let's put this to the vote then. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. So that draws our part B of the agenda to a close. Thank the elected members, the officer and the applicants for their attendance on this, and look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Just to get the other elected members up on screen. There we go. Lovely, thank you. So we now turn to part C of our agenda, which is for the Shire of Augusta-Margaret River. We have the same panel members here, and as noted, we have Councillor Greg Boland in the room and Councillor David Binks online. Could I please ask panel members to confirm that they've duly considered all documentation with a show of hands? Thank you very much. Yes.
Binks online.
Yes. I think we saw, did Councillor Binks, did we see your hand go up?
He's just got to turn his camera on.
Oh, would you mind popping your camera on, Councillor? Otherwise, without a camera, you could just say, yes, you've considered all due materials.
To take it off mute.
So, Councillor, we're not hearing you, so it's possible that you're on mute. Oh, there you are. Could I just check you've considered all materials before you today?
Yes, I have. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. And then in terms of disclosures of interest, I might just ask the elected members, this matter's come before council previously?
That's correct.
Okay. So there's an impartiality declaration for both of you on that matter. And having considered that, you've done that in line with your duties as an elected member, and noting that you have acknowledged that you're not bound by any previous decisions or resolution of the local government, and you undertake to exercise independent judgment in relation to the matters before you today.
Yep.
I made that declaration.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank
I'll make
you.
that declaration as well. Yes, happy with that.
Very good. So in respect of that, both of you are able to continue to participate in the meeting, the debate, the questions, etc., and the voting on this matter. So we have item for lot 12, number 413 Burnside Road, Burnside, which is adjustments to intensive agriculture, brewery, distillery, winery, licensed restaurant, cellar door, ancillary infrastructure, parking and recreational facilities. And we have two presenters today who are in the room with us. Hopefully, Councillor Binks, you're able to see them on camera. We have Mr. Nick Morris and Mr. Mark Halsell. Mr. Morris has 3 minutes to present, and Mr. Halsell has 5 minutes to present. So I might invite those presenters to come forward and make their presentations.
Morning, Madam President, members and Shire members. Nicholas Morris, the proponent for the proposed project on 413 Burnside Road. Just give you a bit of background and vision. This project was principally arose from my personal interest in agriculture and food, and particularly in cooking with local produce. My partner and I also have family connection to the Margaret River region, with our extended family owning and operating Sea Vintners Winery, a biodynamic operation. We spent a long time looking for the right property in the region where we can grow, produce on site and promote it through the proposed venue. We also work with planners and other consultants and engage with the local government planners prior to purchase of the property. We are really looking to develop something in keeping with Margaret River vision, maintaining productive agriculture sites, respecting the rural character of the locality, showcasing local produce, providing for tourists and libraries and supporting other work since the previous approval. Following the site purchase and our previous planning approval, our focus has been on the agricultural aspect of the site. The site did not have any vineyard or orchard. It had large barren areas of land predominantly used for hay crops and cattle. We now planted 5.8 hectares of orchards and vineyards. We have also built dams, irrigation systems. The close planted vine method used means there is almost twice the density of a typical vineyard planting. We are continuing to work on planting and maintaining the property. For example, we have ordered and replaced any vines that didn't make it due to things like pest and animal damage. We are also currently producing grapes for Sea Vintners Winery down the road. We have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on these aspects of the property and continue to do so. As we speak, we're having roof fences put up around our latest vineyard to block to protect against the damage that was done last year from kangaroos at a cost of 15 grand. As far as I can see, we're expecting and delivering on the agricultural zoning of the property, needs of a viable business. Following on from establishing the agriculture aspect, we then turned our attention to constructing the approved restaurant and brewery. As you know, since the pandemic, there's been substantial changes, not just increased construction costs and increased operating costs, but also changes in the market. For example, cellar door versus off-site sale market has really changed. There is an oversupply of off-site wine sales, so we need to rely more on on-site sales and on-site hospitality in order to run a viable agri-tourism business. Current proposal, this has led to our proposal today, which is essentially a moderate increase in patron capacity without substantially increasing the approved built area and definitely maintaining the productive agricultural nature of the site. I say a moderate increase in numbers as based on other established and approved premises in the region. We have a much smaller number of approved patrons, and increase is not going to substantially alter the layout or function of the site, and is in keeping with the nature of past approval and other approvals in the region. We also had a business consultant that we engaged that was a specialist in this area, and he said at 80 people, you know, it was going to be very tough to make it work. And so this is how it came about. I mean, if we could do it with 10, I'd do it with 10, but we can't do it with 80. And that's been the recommendation, and that's why I'm here, as it's been.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Are panel members happy to hear from the next presenter before questions?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So over to you, Mr. Halsall. You've been afforded 5 minutes to make your presentation.
Thank you, Madam President, members, and all other attendees today. Mark Halsall, planning consultant, Margaret River. I've been working on this project with the client, Nick, since 2016. And as members would be aware, there's already an approval in place with the uses and the similar built development format. In fact, it could even be considered to be potentially larger, what's already been approved. The current approval requires a minimum of 5 hectares of agriculture to be installed and maintained for 1 year in order to enable all of the land uses to occur. And this agriculture, the agriculture has achieved that milestone. The restaurant was limited to 80 seats, and this was based on a mediated position, and therefore agreed between the proponent and the Shire at that time. And that was through a position where there was no acoustic information, which was an amenity concern was raised, and that was what was set at the time. The original 5 hectare agricultural requirement was modelled off through facilities not mentioned in the report. At the time, there were a scouring of the area, and we noted that Brookwood had about 5 hectares of vines, Hamlin Bay Wines at the time had about 5 hectares of vines, and that triggered that amount. And those approvals for 5 hectares had facilitated wineries, cellar doors and restaurants. It's disappointing that the Shire don't support the proposal on the basis that the built development format is not raised as a significant issue. Obviously noting that the numbers of occupants are not supported. The proponent, if necessary, is open to a condition requiring them to plant the balance of the agriculture within 5 years of the establishment of the restaurant, which is the current condition, because it's going to do that in any case. Now, we're simply requesting whether or not that is absolutely necessary. The aerial image that I provided through the presentation notes shows that significant investment has been made in agriculture on site, 5.8 hectares or 14 acres, with water supplies, dam construction, and irrigation systems, as well as their stock grazing, and there's also Narran and the dam. Shire, in its interpretation of the scheme, is taking the view that the amount of agriculture growing on the land amounts to the scale of patron enjoyment of the produce. And this is not really specified in the scheme, and in our opinion is not a reasonable interpretation. Comparisons are drawn in the report to places like Lewin Estate, Xanadu wines. These are substantial enterprises that market a lot of wine off-site throughout Australia, even overseas. They're obviously not 100% reliant on patron numbers on-site. With respect to the incidental and complementary nature to agriculture, it's important to note what agricultural enterprise is. It's the growing of agriculture, the water supplies and irrigation systems that support it. It's the production of produce, and it's also the legitimate sale of that. All of that would be typically considered an agricultural enterprise. The restaurant and the public consumption component of the brewery are all incidental to this agriculture. It's the showcasing and tasting of produce on site through cellar door and through the restaurant. It's quite typical for enterprises in this area to want to provide a meal with their product. In this case, it happens to be beverages. There's nothing in the planning framework that states the determining factor is specifically how much agriculture you've got growing. It determines the number of seats. The scale of occupants should be determined based on a reasonable number in terms of what the site can accommodate in its context, take into account typical assessment of issues like traffic, volume of waste produced, general amenity, separation from neighbours, consideration of the access point. In this case, we consider it's clearly demonstrated through the acoustic assessment, and the amount of traffic that's utilising the road, the fact that there's a daytime activity only between 11 a.m. and 6 p.m. with noise restrictions. Conditions can easily be put in place to control noise and activity. There's nothing to suggest, therefore, that the increase in number of people will be unreasonable in this context or what would not been anticipated by someone approaching a premises like this. It's also important to note that this is a maximum number and you wouldn't always experience 200 people at all times every day of the year, particularly given the weather conditions. With regard to traffic, Burnside Road is an important distributor road which connects between Bustle Highway and Paves Road, two main roads. It's 6 metre wide bitumen, as I said, and carried in 2018 460 vehicle movements a day, and in 2019 531 vehicles a day on average on the peak day on a Friday. And since then, the traffic would have increased. Another important regulation is liquor licensing, as advised that 5,000 bottles per annum is the critical point for consideration of a liquor licence, and we provided evidence that that's already been achieved in 2022. It's also important to note that the report doesn't make reference to a reapproval of brewery restaurant cellar door the Shire has issued on 51 Road, Coimbra. I've provided a copy of this to the members and did speak to the owners about this, discussed it with them.
We're at 5 minutes if you want to.
I'll pull it together on those. Yes, the same scheme applied when that approval was issued, and that was based on 6.9 hectares of agriculture. There's 2,500 square metres of licensed area, 74 car parking spaces, and that would allow for possibly up to 300 persons, or 296 on my calculation. That approval was actually reissued while this application was being considered this year. The development's low impact, similar to what's already approved, meeting the definition. And in summary, we consider that this development could easily be approved with conditions as we indicated in our application. This type of activity is what has become the backbone of Margaret River. It's exactly what the scheme is looking for: agriculture, providing an experience, and it's a legitimate family business showcasing such produce.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Halsall. I will invite panel members to ask questions of the presenters now. I might, just to be organised, see if Councillor Binks online has got any questions of the presenters. Thank you.
No, I have no questions at this point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Boland, did you have questions of the presenters?
Yes, it may be something more for the Shire officers when we get to them,
right.
but I think raise it now. Just there's quite a bit of comparison going on to other operations, and Lewin Estate and Xanadu were mentioned just then, but there's the question is probably the applicants also aware that there's reference to other operations such as Glenarty Road, which is a more modest operation, I guess. There's also reference to Brookwood. I'm not sure that Brookwood is operating. As far as I know, they may know, but it's just this cross-referencing to other operations, and there was a reference made to something on 51 Road. So it's a question around the comparisons that are being made. Are you comparing yourselves to Glenarty Road, for example, as one of the other examples?
Thank you.
We're not comparing ourselves to Glenarty Road. I suppose it's a different model of quite a remote location. And obviously this is in a good location. And other examples of approvals, recent approval, Edwards of Wines for the 200-seat restaurant based on 22 hectares of vines, is in a way quite relevant because we've got close planted vines, and once they're all in place, that's equivalent of twice as much vines. And so that's potentially 12 hectares of vines plus the 5-hectare orchard plus the apples. At the end of the day, it's quite similar to many examples. So the 51 Road's obviously a key example I mentioned because it's happened right in the thick of this application and being reapproved. And I mentioned Brookwood and Hamlin Bay because they informed the 5-hectare requirement in the day when the application was originally prepared. So that was in negotiation with the Shire officers to try and find out what was meant to be a reasonable minimum agriculture. So yes, they're not operating now in the format that they were approved and mentioned at the beginning, but that's basically where it came from.
Okay, thank you. All right. Did you have a follow-up to that?
No, that's fine. I think the Shire officers have been
Of
more
course.
across, particularly the 51 road issue that's just come up in the last few days.
We'll get to that. Yeah,
Those
no problem.
Any other questions?
There will be questions, I'm sure, from other panel members. Did you have any questions, Mr. Syme?
Yeah, I do. The capacity of you mentioned 5,000 bottles per annum coming out of the cellar door.
The 5,000 bottles is a trigger that the liquor licensing use for that amount to trigger a liquor license to be generally issued. And in fact, that we recently put our liquor licensing experts have said that they've actually released a note saying that that's actually going to be probably reduced shortly.
So what's your production then?
So once all the new vines, the latest ones that we've put in, once they're all producing around 12,000 tonnes. So it's about, it'll be...
So you've got 12,000 tonnes of grapes coming off your property.
Which sorry, 12 tonnes of grapes coming off.
Tonnes of grapes. Yeah, sounds a bit.
Sorry.
About 6,500 bottles have already been produced. In 2026.
So what would your cellar door sales be per year? 12,000 bottles. Okay.
And we're continuing to plant more.
And that's all of the wine production, all the wine sales are from your own grapes.
Yes.
The wine's made somewhere else. Yeah. Now the brewery, what's the product in the brewery?
So we're doing lagers using organic biodynamic grains, and then we're doing lambic style beers, which are traditional Belgium style beers. So beer was made barrel aged with different fruits from our orchard, and it's fermented with natural airborne yeast, and it's like almost like a kombucha sort of flavour.
So what's the relationship of the brewery to your agricultural produce?
The orchard with the mixed fruits, and they'll be being supplied for the beer, for the lambic style beers.
For the lambic style beer, and the lager is...
And the cider, the apples, and
this cider, you've got lambic beer, and you've got lager.
Distilled products.
Yeah.
And distilled products.
Yeah, at the moment, the focus is the wine and beer.
So what's the relative volume of the brewery as against the wine production? How important is the brewery?
pretty important. Yeah, to get the people in there, eating our food in the restaurant, to have that. You know, we've got a permaculture orchard, so it's a mixed orchard. We're not taking that fruit. There's not one set of fruit trees that we can make enough money by taking that alone to a market and making money. It has to service the venue. So one has to look after the other.
So is your agricultural production going into all of your brewery products?
No, not all. Some of the fruits and vegetables will be used in the restaurant itself as well.
No. The brewery products, do they all contain some of your? I mean, all of your wine production contains.
Yeah, well, not the. I mean the grains and stuff. We have to buy that off site. We're just not big enough to.
So you don't mix anything with that. That's just a straight lager product.
Well, you do with the lambics. You're still doing the same. You're using the.
So what volume, what proportion is that grain product of the total roughly?
To be honest, I'm not 100% sure of what the balance will be there. Roughly. I mean, I can only give you a comparison from like Brewhouse. I think they're 250 seats. I think they do about close to 200,000 litres, 150,000 litres of beer, different beers, not lambic style, but beers through the venue.
So what's your volume though?
About 100,000.
100,000
litres
per year.
Per year.
Okay. Is that a big brewery or a small?
No, small.
Tiny or?
It's a micro brewery. Yeah, it's small. Yeah.
Small.
Yep.
Okay.
I'll come back to you if you've got some more.
Okay. No, that's fine.
Walters, questions?
The brewery's already approved though, isn't it?
Correct, yeah.
So it's the method of operation is already in place. Your focus is really in this not to get reapproval for the brewery, the winery, the grapes and so forth. It's really narrowing down to whether it's 100 or 200 people.
That's correct. Yeah, which, you know, it seems to be connected with how much agriculture we've got on site to how many people we can have. And that's when you say about comparisons, that's why we're bringing the comparisons up, because especially the 51 road, that is very similar as far as how much agriculture and a very similar what they want to achieve. They're building a brewery. So that's why we're using that, because that one's got substantial larger numbers and we're being pushed to 80. So that's.
And in terms of, in your view, if you planted more vines, that would kind of reinforce the fact that it's more agriculture than the tourist type.
Yeah, correct. And I mean, we continue to do so. Like at the moment, like I said, we're putting more vines in, but today, putting up roof fencing. I've got biodynamic compost arriving. You know, all this stuff is expensive. The cuttings come from France that I have to sign off so I won't propagate them. And we also want to keep paddocks for some livestock. We have livestock on at the moment. And also we want to have paddocks for doing hay crops to then make compost and the likes, and seasonal crops. So we don't want to take up the whole thing with vineyard, because you know that's what they think we should do. We want to have a system that feeds itself, and we think that, you know, that's exactly what Margaret River seems to talk about they want, and we're trying to achieve that, but for some reason it doesn't seem that they're taking what we're trying to achieve.
Any other questions from you? Anything else from you? Could you explain to me what other produce from your property goes into the food in the restaurant?
So with the food concept is like a Argentinian open grill sort of thing. So I don't know if you've heard of it, like Francis at the moment, but Argentinian style. Our focus is going to be on barbecued butterfly chickens that we plan on rearing ourselves and using them within the vineyard. That's why I fence it all off, so they can be on pest control and then used in the restaurant by making, you know, maximum profit margin on that product. Then things like pumpkins and all that sort of stuff that we grow, you know, as randomly as we can, and you almost forage, collect them. You know, things like putting them under the ground in Hessian, cooking them, bring them out. You know, it's a bit theatrical, but you'll have a staple there of the chickens, and then seasonal things ongoing.
Okay.
This will be forever changing.
Okay, and explain to me, I think Mr. Halsall, you mentioned the double planting or the, explain that to me.
So the close planted vine method,
Planted.
has been used, and that's one thing that I asked Nick when we're preparing for this. You know, what does that equate to? It's almost like double the density planting. So the typical row vines that you see are obviously for mechanical work. This is more hands-on, and so that's why it's and the reason they're doing it is it's more about quality rather than quantity in the way it's produced. It's the old method, permaculture methods. I'm not an expert on this field, but
more European style.
More European style, yeah.
And you know, with that, we do everything by hand. I've got a two-wheel tractor that I walk behind, and
Sure.
you know, it's very labour.
In terms of the comparisons that have been in the report and that you have raised, do others do that close planting?
Like Wilbelina, what's the
Storm cloud, stormburst,
starburst?
Yeah.
So I mean, there
one
are
or
other
two.
small properties that do it, but I'm not aware of, you know, many.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so some of the other examples are not close planted and therefore there's more acreage. So
All of the other ones that have been the examples are all Australian style planting,
Sure.
wider spacing.
okay, thank you.
Oh, does that, you hand pick everything then, do you?
Hand pick, fertilizer by hand, weed by hand, seed by, like, Tyler Cedar behind me.
Any other?
One more question. Where did the number 200 come from?
So that's when we got started, my accountant put me in touch with a guy that used to run Mandoon Estate. And now he's gone out on his own to do consulting. We had him look at the project and start working with us. And, you know, at one stage also off-site beer sales was a big thing. Everyone was like, you're going to build the brewery too small, blah, blah, blah. Things have changed now. So now it's all in-house. The model is serve the beer that you produce over the bar. That's it. So now the model, after talking to him and he did the numbers, he was like, this is going to be a tough business, you know, at least 80, if at all, if it works. So he gave us the number of 200, and that's,
Okay.
that's what we took.
Can I just speak to that as well? Obviously, we could have said, well, let's go for 300, or obviously it's also a planning consideration of what might be a reasonable use of the land as well. So that was part of the thought process on it.
So, I mean, Margaret River's a weekend market, really, isn't it? So how many days of the week are you going to have 200 people on?
Not many.
That's your end goal. You know, to get that on a good day.
All right, thank you. Now, my next question is without prejudicing any decision that the panel may make, but obviously there is a recommendation for refusal up front, but there is an alternate that's attached later for an approval, and that does talk about 100, and you've talked about 200. In that alternate for approval, are you comfortable with all the other conditions?
Obviously, yeah, condition 4, 300 persons is what we're aiming for. Condition 7, where it talks about no amplified music after 5 p.m. I can't see any reason given that it's 11 till 6, why that wouldn't be 6 p.m. closure. I don't think there's anything in the noise regulations that's really indicate 5 p.m. as a trigger point. There's a question mark about there's already an existing steel crossover to development. So whether or not condition 15 is still required. I guess that's linked to condition 20, talks about a traffic impact assessment, which wasn't raised with us previous to this report. So if that's considered still necessary, then I suppose may inform condition 15. And then condition 22 about the public art, and with us a new policy of council, and obviously it's something that we haven't got under the current approval, and is quite a costly item, so we would question that if possible. But other than that, we could probably work with the other conditions.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no further questions, oh yes, Councillor Binks, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks guys for the presentation. I appreciate it. It's been good to listen to some of the other questions. It seems to me that there's a big question that exists around what is incidental, and whether the proposed development is in fact incidental to the agricultural aspect of the land. Now, it seems that the measure for incidental, it tends to be a fairly physical thing. Mark, I just wanted to confirm with you that your suggestion that increasing the density of the vines is the equivalent of planting the vines out over a larger area, and therefore the incidental side of things doesn't come into it. Is that what I'm understanding?
No, I'm not saying that incidentals doesn't come into it. Just saying that it needs to be considered that the density of planting here based on the area isn't necessarily comparable to the typical area that you would measure on other ways vineyards are planted. So, whilst there's going to be probably about 6 hectares of vines, that's probably equivalent to maybe 12 hectares of vines planted more traditionally.
Can I just say, and liquor licensee views it the same way we do. Usually if we had the same traditional planting in that area, they said, we wouldn't have enough, but they look at the density of plants in that area to, allow us to have that liquor license.
Okay, so, all right, thanks. I think I understand what you're saying there. The next question that I have is, are you familiar or are you aware of other vineyard operations that change their vines, pull them out, plant new ones, change their densities and so on? And if the decision was made down the track that this high density planting was too intensive on the soil, that you would decrease the density of the vines, how does that then impact the incidental nature?
Sure. So we've engaged with a consultant, Anthony Quinlan, who has biodynamic.
I know Anthony.
Company, and currently, we're using his compost, all his fertilizers. He soil tested the ground 3 or 4 times prior to planting and continues to do so. So we're constantly monitoring the soil and giving the ground what it needs. So that as long as we're doing that, that won't happen. Just like any agriculture operation, it's constant monitoring and doing what the plant needs or the animal needs to survive.
Okay, thank you. The final question I have at this point relates to the traffic impact, and that being, do you intend to, or are there any requirements for roadworks at the entry and exit of Burnside Road and the property to deal with turn in, turn out and safe movement of traffic?
When the proposal was put together, it was approved with a major bitumen crossover, and through the assessment with the planners, we didn't get any strong indication of the need for an assessment of that issue. But if it's determined that an assessment of that issue is necessary to cause a possible improvement to that entry point for the amount of vehicle movements, then obviously that would be a reasonable condition. Incidentally, to identify the site entry in the first place. I met on site with the Shire engineer before the property was even purchased to confirm the location was a good location with adequate site distances on a 6 metre wide road. And so we're not anticipating that the existing entry would be insufficient.
Yeah. Do you know what the speed limit is on Burnside Road, Mark?
I'd say it's a typical rural road.
Yeah,
Is it
80.
80, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Yeah, no, I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And thank you to the presenters for that. We'll refer now to the Shire officers and see if the panel members have any questions. We've got Lucy Gowes and Matt Cuthbert online. Thank you. Councillor Boland, I think you indicated that you had some questions for them.
Yes, thanks. It's what I was referring to before, the comparisons that have been made, and one in particular that's cropped up is a proposed brewery in Quarrumup on 51 Road. Can you give us any comment on that, how that compares?
Yeah, I think the comparisons are interesting, but this application, in our view, doesn't turn on how it compares with other things that might have been approved in the past. We've assessed it on its merits, and you know, as a report clearly outlined, there's, you know, many reasons that have contributed to our recommendation for refusal, and none of them turn substantially on how it compares with other proposals, which of course would be different in many ways, but we certainly haven't come here prepared to detail all the various ways that this proposal might differ to those, because we're talking about this particular proposal here today.
And you made comparisons in the report about a number of other wineries in particular, to give some context to it.
Just some context, that's right.
Do you know if Brookwood's operating?
I don't think so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Binks, did you have any questions of the officers?
Yes, I do. Thanks. Hi, Matt. Hi, Lucy.
Hello.
I just want to come back to the question I asked the proponent about the incidental nature of this and future changes. If this is approved for 200 seats now, as they are requesting, if they decide down the track that it's not in fact suitable for high density planting of the vines, and they reduce that but don't plant anything else anywhere, how does this requirement for the development to be incidental impact that? I mean, can the business continue to operate even if they pull all the vines out and plant something else?
The answer to that part of the question is yes, you know, unless there was a specific condition that required a certain amount of vines to be grown on the property, which would be unusual. But you're right to focus on the concept of incidental, and unfortunately, it's not a mathematical equation. It's not as a concept and as something that's dealt with by our scheme. It's not expressed in a way that says if you have this many vines, you can have this many people. And in fact, you know, that's why we've taken quite a bit of time throughout the report to sort of pick apart that concept and the words that the scheme uses to try and get that across, being words like predominant, ancillary, incidental, subordinate, the need for uses to have a functional relationship with one another, the importance of scale and the importance of context. So we've deep dived into all of those various things, and the outcome is that it's not a mathematical equation. But what I would point to as evidence of the fact that this agricultural production is not, this brewery and restaurant is not incidental to the growing of grapes on the property is the fact that the applicant has said themselves, you know, not just today, but all throughout. For example, the fruit is there to service the venue. the venue is the predominant use. The reason that there are agricultural products being grown here is to service the venue, and so in our minds, that makes the venue the predominant use.
Yeah, okay, thanks. That's clear for me. Thank you. I don't have any more questions.
Thank you. Any questions from other panel members of the officers?
Yes, I do. You did mention that in the context of this close planting of vines, the indication that maybe how would you monitor that?
We wouldn't.
You wouldn't, but you do have a condition saying that the landscaping and the has to be maintained. Is there anything, the conditions, if you can't monitor it, then a condition can be imposed to reinforce the fact that they have to comply with that.
We would have certainly recommended a condition that required the close planting if we thought that that would address our concerns, but it doesn't.
So at the moment, they have an approval for a brewery.
Correct.
And a restaurant.
Correct.
So all this discussion about the predominant use and so forth, why is that being dragged up now when they've already got an approval for it? We're really only talking about, in your mind, is it valid to bring that up? Because it's already there. It's going to be operating regardless. Now we're talking about increasing the numbers in the cafe. Isn't that more a function of the impact that has on the amenity of the locality?
That's one consideration, but in our minds, a brewery and restaurant that accommodate 80 people is a very different situation from a brewery and a restaurant that cater for 200 people. And the degree, that idea of having a functional relationship with the agriculture, that is relevant to consider. That's certainly our point of view.
Okay. And in terms of visitors to the site, I mean, if 2 or 3 tourist coaches pull up, or a tourist coach with 100 people on it pulls up, and there's already 80 people sitting in the cafe, that's kind of got the same impact on the locality, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And it would be, the operator would be required to manage that so that they could keep in compliance with both any approval that we or you would issue and their liquor licensing requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Syme?
From a incidental use aside, I understand your argument on that, but from a traditional planning matters point of view, it seems to me, reading your report, that the issues that you might look at for a 200-seat venue are pretty close to being covered. That is, the 2 car bays short, the noise issues are acceptable, the traffic issues can be conditioned. It seems to me, if we're looking at it from a traditional planning point of view, there are no issues that we can point to which would cause us concern at 200 seats. The argument is independently of the argument about incidental use.
Yes, I think the way that you've described it's correct, but we say that the use ought to be considered first before you then get to the development. We agree the development in terms of the way that it's designed, the way that it's proposed to be managed doesn't cause us any concerns. But that doesn't deal with the question of use.
Okay.
All right. I have a question for the officers. And again, this question is without prejudicing any further discussion as to which way the panel chooses to go with its decision. But when I asked the applicant about the conditions in the alternate that you provided to us, and thank you for that, they raised a question around condition 7 and the issue of music not occurring outside of the hours of 5 p.m. when the operating hours were to 6 p.m. Could you comment on that, whether condition 7, pardon me, is a reasonable condition?
I believe our intention was to limit the operating hours to what they have been approved as previously. And my recollection of what has been approved, or, the approval that's in place now, limits the operation until 5.
Of music, but obviously the actual operation of the facility.
Yes, so the music and the hours of operation should be consistent.
Okay, so it would be possible, therefore, for condition 7 to be 6 p.m. rather than 5 p.m.
If you were to approve the operating hours until 6, yes.
Yes, thank you. And then there was a question around condition 15 and a sealed crossover, and whether that related to condition 20, or indeed perhaps some of the questioning that Councillor Binks has put to the applicant today. Could you provide me with some context to those 2 conditions, please?
Sure. The applicant has said to us as much as they've said to you, in the sense that they believe that the road's capable of sustaining that amount of increased use, and turning and so on would be fine. We're suggesting that in order to get some confirmation of that, and to determine whether there would be any upgrades needed, that has led us to recommending to you condition 20.
Yeah, okay, and it might follow therefore that condition 15 might be required. If it's not required, then obviously it falls away because it's redundant, but it's
Correct.
there just in case. Okay. And condition 22, the matter of public art, they're saying that for the approval that they currently have, they don't have a condition of that nature. So has this been brought in by a particular threshold or new policy, or please could you provide me with a rationale for that?
Sure, it's something that we've formalised in the intervening period since the previous approval was issued. It's something that we have consistently recommended to the DAPs where applications have been determined by DAPs, and it's something that has been regularly imposed on approvals that have been issued by the DAP.
All right, lovely.
Can I just follow up on that? We notice if that condition were applied, that's applied to a value of development. Now,
yes,
there's a value of development here of 2.25 million.
Mm-hmm.
How much of that actually refers to works that have already been approved?
That is a question that I think would be best answered by the applicant.
Because it seems to me, if they're already spending money on the brewery, already spending money on the structures, I can't see $2.25 million worth of works in there, but although it's a question. It would become important that condition 22 were applied.
The threshold for the condition is 1 million. That's when we impose it.
Okay.
Consistent with the state government and the way that the state imposes that same condition.
So it would be up to the applicant, again, without any prejudice as to what might happen again, it would be up to the applicant then to illustrate what the actual cost was for this particular application. Is that the case?
Well, that's where the 2.5 million comes from. That's the value that the proponent's given us.
Okay, all right.
which has led us to this meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, any further questions?
I just had a few quick ones, I think. Just in the officer recommendation, which may become the motion or may not, so I'm just clarifying it now. I noticed in the first line, the application is inconsistent with clause 4.2.2.1 Roman 7. I think that should be, rather than Roman 7, should be G. Do you agree with that?
I agree.
Okay. And
It's the refusal. Sorry, councillor, you're speaking.
yeah, sorry, the officer. Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Really.
So that typo refers to which reason for refusal?
The first one.
Okay.
Just the first line there. I just went and checked it.
So it's not 7, it's G, is that
G,
correct?
yes. Bracket G.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And you happen to know the speed limit on Burnside? It was said to be 80.
I believe
hot topic in Margaret River at the moment.
I believe that's correct for the time being.
And one other one, which was getting back to what was being said about, are we talking about, in what come, whether we're talking about 80 patrons, 100 patrons, 200 patrons. I assume the report's been prepared in the way that it has because a new application like this triggers a full consideration of the whole matter. Is that why we might effectively only be talking about 80, 100, 200 patrons, but that's why the report is the way it is?
Yes, quite correct.
Okay.
Yes, I think to clarify, I think the officers regarded this to be a Form 1 as opposed to a Form 2, given their view of the scale of the changes and the modifications requested. Would that be correct?
Correct.
Okay. No further questions at this point, because I'd like to move ahead with the item if possible. Are we all satisfied with the questions that we've raised? All right, thank you. So at this point, and we thank the presenters and we thank the officers for their responses. The matter before us at Part C, item 3.1, is a responsible authority recommendation, an officer recommendation to refuse the application for 4 reasons. So I might seek a mover and a seconder for that in the first instance. Is there a mover for the refusal?
Yes, I'm prepared to move that.
Okay, councillor Boland moves. Is there a seconder for the refusal?
Yeah, I'm happy to second that.
Councillor Binks seconded that. Councillor Boland, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes. I think matters are well covered in the documentation we've got in front of us. It probably comes back to that key issue of whether the proposed use is acceptable or not, and the extent to which the non-agricultural uses are incidental to the predominant agricultural use. And it's probably a matter of degree. You can talk about plantings, how many vines, how many trees, and land area, and et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's pretty well canvassed in what we've got, what we've heard from the administration, what we've heard from submitters as well, and from the submissions that came when the matter was advertised, but also the submissions, very helpful submissions we've had from the applicants. At the end of the day, I'm seeing it as fairly modest agriculture and fairly considerable venue. And just reiterating the comment that Mr. Cuthbert made then, that really the predominant use of the site is really these other uses other than the predominant agricultural use. So that's, in a nutshell, there's obviously quite a bit we'll be debating, I assume, because I appreciate that effectively we are talking about the patronage, and there will be some other matters, additions and whatever. But I think if there is the refusal is the vote, then there's 80, an patron venue effectively. But if that isn't the vote, then we'll be talking about what other approval will it be, whether it remains at 80, whether it goes to 100, which was the alternate recommendation, which came from the Shire as an alternate, as the refusal, whether it's something like 200. So.
Thank you. Councillor Binks, seconder, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the chance to speak to this. There is nothing compelling about the presentation that I've seen to cause us to deviate away from our local planning scheme as far as the predominant and incidental use is concerned. There is no question that a drive down Burnside Road, which is just a couple of kilometres down from where I live down here, that the development, which has begun because they had approval for the smaller size 80, it stands out. So to increase it by another 120 is going to increase the scale, the physical scale of the site, and become by far and away the most dominant feature in this in the farmland and in the agricultural area that we're in. I'm really concerned that people are, or that it's being suggested that we measure apples with oranges when we're talking about the physical dominance of the development versus the agricultural size, the area. And then they say, well, you know, just by squeezing everything into a smaller size or a smaller acreage, we're still achieving the incidental use. Well, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. You know, there could be an argument for maintaining the development at the 80 and then just squeeze 200 people in there. But we know that's not going to work. So I think the reasons that the officers have provided are sound. I think they're all based on good planning. And as far as the use is concerned, I don't think there's any reason why we should be approving something of this scale.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any objection to the motion? Mr. Syme.
Yes, I'm inclined to take a contrary view. There is already an approval for a fairly substantial development. From a physical point of view, it seems to me there is some extension of the external space, but physically, there's not a lot of difference between what's approved and what would be in place as to following this if this were to be approved. I understand the argument of the council officers, but I don't actually think it stands up, because the way it's been presented is that the agriculture is feeding an outlet for its agricultural product. Just because the agriculture isn't in large measure sold off-site doesn't mean it's not agriculture. There is a fair bit of agricultural product which is sold off-site, that is in terms of wine production and so on. And I think then from a planning point of view, the difference, as we've established, if we're looking at all of the traditional measures, traffic, noise, etc., there is no nuisance factor there. If we're looking then at comparisons, and the comparisons are useful as a guide, and are a very crude measure, we're looking at seats per hectare of vines or olives in this case. generally the examples that were given in the RAR range between 2 and 5 up to 9 seats per hectare, if that's the crude measure we're looking at. The proposal here is for 17.8 seats per hectare. That's substantially more intense, but I do take the advice that we can not necessarily double the effective area, but certainly increase it by a substantial amount because of the close planting. I think that's a fair point. If we've got, therefore, even in Margaret River terms, quite intense production on this site, I think that I think that is the evidence that we're getting from the proponent, then I think we need to take some view about that. So I can't see really any logic that comes as to why there's a difference from a planning point of view between 80, 100 or 200 patrons as an allowable maximum, bearing in mind that that probably isn't going to be the case for most of the year. Although in busy times in Margaret River, it can be easily be met. So from a physical, I can't see any logic which leads us to put any where that boundary should be. I think that the point about the products being incidental are made. I did question closely, for example, what the role of the brewery was, because I think that's a bit of an outlier. But I'm satisfied that there are, because of the nature of it and its fairly boutique nature of it, and the fact that it's predominantly sold on site, then the agricultural production does feed that. So for all of those reasons, I'd be rather inclined to look at approving this and approving it up to 200 patrons.
Okay. To leave it there. Mr. Coltas.
Yes, I too am supportive of the proposal to 200. I take the argument that the officers have put forward, and they put forward a reasoned argument. I think that the same argument could have been put forward for 60 or 80 or 100 seats. If we're looking at proportional use of the site for the product on site within the development, the proposal. The fact that it's approved at its current number, I think what I've looked at is the argument of incidental to 80 and say that it's probably not. The argument in my mind stands out that it could be argued that it's not incidental at 80. In terms of the scale of development, I take Councillor's comments about that the buildings stand out, but I suppose having driven down Burnside Road for many, many years now, any large sheds or buildings that go up will stand out because it's quite rural in nature. I think the amount of product that the proponents produce on site and aiming to produce on site, and the plantings they've got, the amount that they're talking about increasing it to, will help the incidental argument. Patronage to the site, as I raised the issue with the staff. I mean, you can get a lot more than 200-300 people there at any one time, just simply doing cellar door sales. If that's something that comes, if the wines are exceptional or they're marketed appropriately, and the impact on the locality, think has been addressed through conditions and noise reports that have been put forward. I think the fact that the development won't be sitting at 200 people during the at every day that it's opened reduces the impact on the locality as well. But I'm supportive of the proposal to go to 200 based on the fact that the development is already approved and the incidental nature of the argument put forward by the proponents to me is one that I'm prepared to accept.
All right, thank you. From my point of view, I do agree with the specialist member and the deputy presiding member. Looking at what could be regarded as an incidental use, which is consequent, naturally attaching, and relates to the predominant use. In my judgment, this proposal is incidental. I take the predominant use to be very broad, in fact, and I think the sustainable approach that the applicant has taken should be considered in all of its dimensions, and the way that that investment occurs in the way that it's produced, managed, the recycling of materials, etc. So I do see this as an incidental use. The scale, I think, as we've previously spoken, it's a small change to the physical fabric, and I think that that's not unrealistic. The functional relationship, just going through the matters raised in the RAR, yes, I do see there being a functional relationship. I don't believe it has to be completely self-sufficient, as the RAR is implying. I think it's perfectly reasonable to bring some grain or some bread or some butter or whatever in, but we have heard from the applicant that a great deal of the production on site is served to customers, and it's a produce of the predominant operation of intensive agriculture. Is it subordinate? I don't see the non-intensive agricultural use as being the dominant use. There is clearly a functional relationship, and you know, the restaurant showcases the predominant output from the intensive agriculture. The context, I don't see that in the narrow sense of what you can view from Burnside Road. I see that in the context of Margaret River as a region which is, you know, the food larder of WA. So I see that in all of its complexities, and it's not just therefore for me about the visual connection between where things are grown and where they're served. And the comparisons I've not found particularly helpful, but I have understood the extremely intensive aspect of the agricultural process, which the proponent is currently and is proposing to continue with. So again, I do agree with Councillor Binks that we've got apples, oranges and pears and the like, so those comparisons are not entirely helpful, and it is a matter of one's judgment on what is incidental, or whether it is actually going to impact the intensive agriculture, which seemed to be the starting point for the reasons for refusal. And I don't see this threatening the intensive agriculture at all. And as Mr. Syme has outlined, in all other aspects of the proposal, it's either already approved or is regarded not to create significant impact, or is capable of approval with a series of conditions as outlined. And that's regarding noise, traffic, parking, waste management, etc. So I'm erring on the side of not supporting the refusal and the reasons for refusal, but rather to look to the alternate for approval and potential for 200 patrons on the site. So with that, Councillor Boland, would you like to close the debate?
Yes, thank you. It is somewhat artificial the way we're approaching this, because as a refusal when there's already an application for 80. But if you apply the principles of the town planning scheme, local planning scheme for orderly planning, good planning in agricultural areas, and this is a lot about what's happening in agricultural areas, what should be occurring in agricultural areas. So there's a local planning scheme trying to deal with these pressures on the agricultural land and what venues are approved in priority agricultural land. And because it's artificial, it really is probably going to lead to this being, if it's refused, a matter of degree around where we go to from here. And I think we need to consider seriously the patron numbers and some other conditions, because there are other issues around this, which I assume we'll be exploring shortly. But yes, it was the refusal, I think, was well-intentioned on the part of the Shire officers, looking at our local planning scheme, looking at this particular project and whether it met the criteria. The view was that it met the criteria for approval, which that's the matter before us shortly. So,
all right, thank you. So let's take a vote on the motion on the table, which is to refuse for 4 reasons. Those in favour of the refusal? That's the 2 councillors, thank you. Those against the refusal? That's the other 3 panel members. So the motion is lost, 3-2. I would therefore like to call for an alternate and a mover for an alternate motion, please. We do have on page 19 of our agenda an alternate which the officers have provided for us as a starting point. An alternate, please. Thank you, Mr. Syme.
I'll move the alternate as suggested in the RAR.
Yes.
With the condition 4 to read 200 and condition 7 to read 60.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that clarity. Do I have a seconder, please? Mr.
Yes.
Coltas, thank you. Sorry.
I can't speak.
No.
I'm sorry, Madam President. I wanted to point out with.
No, I'm sorry, you can't
sorry.
speak.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. Thank you. We're in debate, so thank you. Sorry, Mr. Syme, would you like to speak to the motion you've put?
Look, yes, I think I've said most of it, and I take Councillor Boland's point. I think if this were a fresh, even though it's a Form 1, we are cognizant of the fact that there is an existing approval, and I wouldn't think that this needs to be a precedent for other proposals that may come in. I think the need to preserve priority agriculture is an important one. I think in this particular case, the way it's presented is that this combination of uses will actually make viable much more intensive agriculture and agricultural on this particular site than might otherwise be the case. And that's an important element to remember. I wouldn't necessarily see this as precedent for anything else at all. I think in this particular case, the priority agriculture is not only preserved but celebrated. I think from all other planning points of view, the scale is entirely appropriate, and for that reason I think it can be approved.
Thank you, Mr. Syme. Mr. Coltas, a seconder?
Yes, I too support the alternate recommendation with the changes as pointed out by Mr. Syme, conditions 4 and 7. I don't, once again, I tend to agree that had this come before us as a fresh application, we would have different eyes looking at it in terms of the argument. We're looking at a fresh application, which is really talking about numbers. And in terms of the method of operating the current site, I agree with the site scale and the type of use that is being undertaken on the site. It reinforces the agricultural nature of the site. In terms of the impact of changes to the proposal as already approved, I think we would look at it simply as managing the amenity impact of the increase in numbers. And for that reason, I'm supporting it.
Thank you, Mr. Coltas. Would any other panel members like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Boland.
Yes, I would. Probably a few things with the motion, if I could run through some things there that may need some adjustment and a minor detail in part 2 might be we don't have a joint development assessment panel now. I don't think that we have a regional development assessment panel. We may need to make that change, but again, that's just a minor detail.
In the preamble, part
2,
Condition 2, it talks to the joint development assessment panel, so it could just say development assessment panel.
We can do that administrative.
We can make that administrative change with the approval of the mover and the seconder.
Yes,
Thank you for pointing that out.
I'm just running through things. The main problem from my point of view is the part 4, the maximum number of 200 patrons. And I'm not sure if we have the justification for that number. Member Simon was very helpful in doing the relationship between area and patrons, and as the formula could come up with 9 per hectare, or sorry, 9 per hectare, when this proposal is twice that intensity. And I think there will be significant impacts from the sort of number that we are talking about. The figure 80 was arrived at some years ago as a mediated outcome that the developer was accepting of something around that amount. I know it's an enlarged project now, but does it go, does it more than double? There's that issue. I think we really need to investigate the number a bit more. We did hear from the applicants in their submissions that something less than 200 would be seemed like acceptable. So it may have been that was the outer ambit of their request, and maybe something less than that is more appropriate. Because yes, there will be impacts, whether that's traffic, sound, whatever. I'm particularly concerned about the water issue. That is conditioned around that being investigated. Fire is another issue, a very topical issue in the area. Bushfire management, I know that's conditioned as well, but the more people you have there, the more people you've got to get out in the event of a fire. So yes, I think I would like to see a change to that number. I won't suggest anything just at this point. My Councillor Binks may have some comment around that. I'll go into number 7, the time. That's probably a fairly minor issue. May not be any great problem from a 6 p.m. finish as opposed to a 5 p.m. finish. I'll move to number 11 about the car parking spaces, and that is correct on a patronage of 200. We had this discussion at council when it was going through that 52 was calculated on 200, but if you were calculating it on 100, which this alternate recommendation had 100 in it, then it became 27. So I'll just point that out, that the number varies according to the patronage. Number 17, I mentioned that I think the nutrient and irrigation management plan is a very significant part of this. That's remaining as per the current motion, and again, 20, the traffic assessment, I think there could be some quite significant traffic issues along Burnside Road. I don't know whether the other panel members are aware of the very significant trial project, 3-year trial project, which is potentially coming to Shire of Augusta-Margaret River and the entirety of the city of Busselton, in conjunction with the RAC and main roads, to significantly lower speed limits throughout that whole southwest area. And so that's to deal with safety issues, which there's been too many serious accidents to. This patronage at a high level of people who probably have been consuming some intoxicating beverages, safety becomes a very significant issue. And then public art is something we are putting into our planning approvals, and I would like to see that remain for the benefit generally of artistic community and the amenity of venues like this. Thank you, that's all for now.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Binks, did you wish to make comment? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. The proposed alternate recommendation is yeah, that's going to be fine. The only issue I have is the more than doubling of the patronage from what is currently approved from 80 to 200. I cannot see any justification for more than doubling the current patronage. Councillor Boland mentioned the car parking side of things. So if we require 52 car parking bays, that's 5 rows of 10 vehicles all side by side. If you look at it that way, just that on its own is going to create a significant impact. To limit it to the 80, which is to the 100, which we worked out at what was it, 25, 27 bays. That, you know, the impact of that is going to be significant, still over and above what it is, but you know, to go from 80 up to 200 is unreasonable. I see no planning grounds for it. There's no justification. This is, you know, I think that's unreasonable. The rest of the conditions I'm happy with. Chair, my question to you is, given that the motion that is before us is for 200, how are we best to deal with this? Do you require me to foreshadow the same alternate motion but with 100?
You could, if you wished, put forward, because we have a motion on the table which is inclusive of 200, you could put forward an amending motion if you wish. And if you have a seconder for that and we put it to the vote for an alternate number to 200, you could approach it in that way.
Okay, well, thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. In fact, that's what I will do.
Okay.
I would like to put forward an amending motion to bring things back into line with the advice from our staff. The vehicle side of things, I think we've mentioned 54 bays in these conditions, haven't we?
52 is here at the moment, Councillor.
Yeah.
So would I be right to paraphrase you in the way that you wish to put this amending motion? You wish to condition 4, propose that as 100 patrons.
Yes, that's correct.
And, and tie in with that condition 11, which you would reduce to 27 car bays. Is that your amending motion?
Yes, I think that's my amending motion. Thank you.
Okay, so that's moved as an amending motion by Councillor Binks. Is there a seconder, please, for that? Thank you, Councillor Boland. Did you want to say any more about that?
No.
Okay, Councillor Boland, did you wish to say any more as seconder?
Yes, I support the 100. It's a figure that I think can justify on a number of grounds, particularly that relationship of area to seats that we were talking about before. It sits with the recommendation that's come from the Shire about the suitable number if it was going to increase. What I'm wondering about here is whether we probably can't really get into an auction around this. We're hearing various numbers, such as it's been proposed at 200, as I think Amber's claim, whether there is some potential if 100 isn't acceptable, then
perhaps we put it to the vote and see where we go.
Very well.
Thank you.
Sorry, just on that, I would not like it to close off. Well, is it going to close off the discussion of numbers? Because from the applicants themselves, they were not saying that 200 was absolutely required. So whether it is, an adjustment of, I'm saying 100, but whether it's an adjustment doubling to 160, my position is 100, because I think that is justified on the.
That's what we've got on the table. We've got an amending motion for 100 patrons and 27 parking bays. Anybody wish to speak against that, or should we just put it to the vote? Those in favour of that amending motion, so that's the 2 elected members. Those against, that's the other 3 panel members. That motion is lost 2 to 3. Are there any other amending motions? I haven't actually spoken yet on the matter, but please.
I propose that the figure of 200 be 160.
So condition 4 would be 160 patrons, and that would make condition 11.
Haven't done the maths. I think the officers could probably do the maths. It's 4 patrons per bay plus 2. I think there's an extra 2 for some reason. It's in the report somewhere. So whatever.
Perhaps condition 11 could
be 40 plus 2. I think 42 parking bays.
42 parking bays. Okay. That's moved by Councillor Boland as a further amending motion, seconded. Rules of Councillor Vinks, seconded. Yeah. Anybody wish to speak to that, either the mover or the seconder?
Well, I'll speak to it as the mover. I assume we aren't going to go to the applicants because they weren't speaking previously. But been a useful question to have posed to them. If 200 isn't the absolute, well, isn't the absolute that you're after, then what is that number that you're talking about, which could be less than 200? I'm surmising that it may have been 160, but that's speculation on my part. But I think it's based on some evidence. And I think it does minimise the impact to some extent of what is going to be a fairly significant project in this particular setting. By the way, we did have a site visit. We went to, the council went out, looked at the site and the partly constructed building. So 200 is a fairly large number in the scheme of things. We've seen the other examples. I would suggest it should be somewhat less. So I'll propose that it be 160.
All right, thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak on that amending motion? Shall we put that one to the vote? Those in favour of amending condition 4 to 160 patrons and condition 11 to 42 parking bays, that's the 2 elected members. Thank you. Those against? That's the 3 other panel members. That motion is lost 2-3. Are there any other amending motions to what we have before us, which is consistent with that moved by Mr. Simon, seconded by Mr. Coltaz? Shall we put that motion to the vote? Those in favour of the motion? That's the 3 panel members. Those against that motion? That's the 2 elected members. That motion is carried 3-2. Thank you. And thank you very much for your patience as we worked through that debate and discussion. Just returning ever so briefly to our agenda, we've got a number of matters just to note under appeals and SAT applications. There's no other business, so I would announce the meeting closes at 11. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, councillor, and thank you to the staff at the Shire who